All right, and we are live. Welcome everyone to another live webinar brought to you by India Sourcing Trip. I hope you guys are having a great Saturday morning, afternoon, evening, depending on where you're watching from. Today, we've got a really cool webinar for you guys. We're going to be talking about a huge opportunity in e-commerce that is really unprecedented. This is an opportunity for global sellers to sell on the Amazon India marketplace. And to talk about this huge opportunity and to help you guys sell on Amazon India, I've got with me some people from a company called Global Seller Solutions. So please welcome Somesh and Jasmine and Jonathan. Hey guys, how are you doing?
Hi, nice to be
Hey
with
guys,
you.
everybody, we're very happy to be here. Thanks.
Thank you very much for having us.
Thank you so much. So we met, we've been connected on Facebook for a couple of months, and then we met in London.
That's right.
Right, we met in London earlier this month, and it was very interesting. So really happy to have you guys over here. So somebody's saying we have buffering issues. Brad Holland is saying we have buffering issues. I think it seems okay over here. Can other people watching let me know if you guys are having buffering issues too? Let me just quickly go into the Facebook group and see if it's if the video is running okay over there, because it seems fine at my end here. All good now? Brad says it's all good. Okay, cool. Thank you so much, Brad. All right, so what we're going to do today is Somesh and Jonathan and Jasmine have a presentation to share with us, and they're going to be talking about the opportunity that is available to all of you global e-commerce and Amazon sellers. And then they're also going to be talking about their services and how they can help you sell on Amazon India. And then we have a super special offer for all of you guys, so stay until the end of the webinar. Okay, so before we share your screen and before you go into all of your slides, why don't you guys introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about your background and how did you end up in in this space with Amazon India? So Somesh and Jasmine, why don't you guys go first?
All right. Do you want to go first?
Yeah, well, my name is Jasmine. We're here in Yorkshire, in England. I'm an entrepreneur, and like all of you, and I spent many years in India and the Middle East doing volunteer work before I started in business, and that's it basically.
Yeah. Jasmine actually specialized in investor relations to help fund charities that focus around children and refugees and things like that. So that was what she was doing. But anyway, coming to me, I've been an entrepreneur with over 25 years of experience in the media, audio, music, production, e-commerce. And we started on Amazon back in 2015, and we've run businesses in multiple countries, including India and Singapore, and now in the UK, of course. And I, along with my wife, have spent many years in humanitarian projects, and I love paying it forward by helping others. So so that's us. Now next to Jonathan.
Yep. Hi there. Good morning, everyone, or good evening, everyone. I'm Jonathan, again, a bit of an entrepreneur at heart, but over the last many years, which is 20 odd, I've specialized in working with IT companies and business companies and setting up and delivering fit for purpose solutions. That's basically my aim. Within the global seller solutions world, my specialization is specifically towards the regulatory, legal compliance, and making sure that everything runs smoothly, well, to the best of my ability, in the background. So that's about me.
Okay, cool. Awesome. Thank you, guys. All right, so let's get right into the presentation. So I'm going to put your slides up on the screen, and I'm going to hand it over to you guys. So all of you watching, if you have any questions, type them in to the comment section on Facebook, And we'll take all of your questions at the end of the presentation, but feel free to type them in whenever they come up, and then I'll read them out to Jasmine and Somesh and Jonathan over here. All right, guys, so over to you.
Great. So basically, Global Seller Solutions, we are providing access to emerging markets or existing markets, but we provide legal, regulatory, tax, all those different service compliances, including the entry point, so that you can be set free to focus on your own business, growing what you're best at, and mainly, you just focus on your sales and growth and products, and we take care of all the other stuff, the admin, the paperwork, and regulatory, all this stuff, taxes, government, all those different things like that. All right, so there is actually audio there. I'm a poor replacement for it, but anyway, we are here. All right, so why India? We're going to talk about India. So you've got over 1.2 billion people. Actually, the retail market in India is supposed to be reaching around $1.1 trillion by 2022. It's English speaking. And one very interesting thing about mobile data is very, very cheap. Currently, on my mobile SIM that I have from India, I can get 2 GB of data per day, which is really, really good. And so that's cool, so everybody is sort of streaming all over the place, and almost everybody has a mobile phone. It's very, very cheap. So that's something very good. So currently there are 500 million phone users and 625 million internet users. Now that's growing very fast. So let's go on to the next one. It is currently the fastest growing market in the world. It is a highly regulated and protected retail market. So there is a bar to entry, because you have to set up a local entity. You have to have a local nominee director. There are a few things to go through, but the potential is huge. Amazon India has 65% repeat customers. Actually, back in 2015, 16, we don't know if this is still the case, but at that time we heard through an informal, unofficial channel that the Amazon India CEO was the highest paid Amazon CEO at the time in the world. Now, I don't know if this was just a grapevine or what, but it was very interesting. Anyway, and Amazon has been investing huge amounts of money. They originally invested $2 billion. Then recently they invested another $3 billion. And it has the largest, excuse me, office space in the world, in 1.8 million square feet, in Hyderabad. In addition to that, you've got Flipkart, which is another e-commerce marketplace, and it was recently acquired by Walmart. And actually, Flipkart is even bigger than Amazon India currently. So they're both very, very big. So huge opportunities there. Just to give you a little bit about the sales seasons, like on the left, you see the column, and that's all the different sales seasons you would normally encounter in other countries, like, in the US and UK and EU. So you've got Black Friday, Cyber Monday, Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's, Boxing Day, Labor Day, Independence, Easter, Mother's Day, Father's Day, Valentine's Day, back to school. All right. So these are the usual ones that you're, getting. But on the Indian side, on the right side, you can get some of these other ones where, you've got more opportunities and occasions to, boost your sales. So you've got Republic Day, which is in January, Independence Day in August. There's Diwali, which is the Festival of Lights. That's really the biggest festival. It's like Christmas. And that, excuse me, happens in October. So imagine you had Black Friday and Cyber Monday and Prime Day happening, but at other times of the year as well. So it gives you a boost in your sales, So these are just some other things. And just to give you an idea of October 2019, that was just in the first 5 to 6 days. That's the festive month, by the way, October 2019, because they have like different festivals, and Diwali usually happens either at the end of October or the beginning of November. So it's a whole month of just real big festivals. Schools are off and holidays and things like that. So just to give you an idea, this is the first bar is from 2017. The next is 18 and 2019. You can see there's been a huge growth. And of course, Flipkart had the largest share. But remember, Amazon came in much later. So Flipkart's been around for a bit longer. So they do have a big market share. Yes, they do. But Amazon's growing very, very fast. And recently we heard that Amazon India is able to do deliveries to almost 90 to 97% of the postcodes in India, which is quite amazing. They've really, really covered the ground very well. The other thing is that because Amazon Prime is so cheap in India, you won't believe how cheap it is. It is about $15 a year for a subscription. So almost anybody can afford to pay for Prime, which is great. And Amazon India is also investing heavily into Amazon Prime, creating content, localized content. So, yeah, so this is just to give you an idea. You can see that this just in the first 5 to 6 days of October during the festive month, you had a $3 billion sales turnover on these platforms. There's a 30% year-on-year growth. All right. So, okay. So let's imagine you're already selling in different marketplaces around the world. By the way, we do not recommend starting with Amazon India unless you're based in India. This is more like you're already selling in other marketplaces and now you want to grow and expand your business. So preferably it's for mature sellers, people who are a bit more experienced. You've got already experience with Amazon. So you're just looking for another expansion, and that's very good. So you've got like this is comparison. And again, these are purely projected and we've just taken the same ratios and we've kept a 20% profit on your annual turnover in each of the marketplace. So if you look at the figures, you can see that India has a total population of 1.33 billion. The online buyers currently, okay, this is the current figure, 425 million, growing at 6 million new buyers month by month. So based on the figures, and if you take the population to revenue ratio of the other marketplaces, then we're looking at an annual revenue of about 800K if you're doing 500K in the US, right? So the profit is 20%, we're taking modest, and the opportunity cost would be 160K in lost profits. So if your business value, excluding India, were 100%, let's say your business is valued at $1 million currently, adding the Indian marketplace could potentially boost your business value by another 51%. Again, these are not guaranteed, revenues or anything like that. These are based on projections. It depends on your business, your products, and research. But this is very, very potential, as you can see. So if you're looking at an exit eventually, imagine having the Indian marketplace as a part of your business. You're already set up, you're selling. It can add a huge bonus to your business value if you're looking at an exit. All right.
Right. Sumesh, thanks for that. So I think this part is mine again, which falls into regulation and the legal part. Yes. Again, reiterating what Sumesh had mentioned earlier for the barrier of entry. Currently, India is very open to foreign investors and foreign investment. However, they want to do it in a proper way and in an honest way that does not impact their local sellers. And this is where it falls into a protective nature. So what they have done is there is a level of legality that needs to be managed and maintained when entering the Indian market, something that we at Global Seller Solutions help us through and help all of you through, those that are interested in selling in India. And as you can see, the big levels you tend to come across are things on the legal side, the corporate, and the taxes. So looking at these aspects, this is not something, I think, again, which Sumesh had mentioned earlier, is something we would invite a new seller to the platform Amazon to come and start in India. And the reason for that is the complexity is pretty high compared to selling in other marketplaces, maybe in Canada or the US or Europe. But again, this is what we help with, and we manage these aspects, which if you were to do on your own would take at least a week, if not more, per month, just dealing with this. For example, things like GST, these are regular things which have to be done on a monthly basis. And if you don't meet them, you could face significant penalties from local authorities. And it's very important to understand that these have to be met, and they're all digital, which is good. But there is also a potential of you physically needing to be present in various parts of these, like board meetings. Yeah, so that's what the compliance snapshot looks like. Again, legal, corporate, and taxes. They happen someone monthly, someone yearly, and someone's one-off when you set up the company. I'm just going to now hand over again, and this is some of the questions that came up over a period of time. Is that all right? Yeah.
Talk about that, the mindset. And for many years, India was closed to selling products that were from foreign countries. But in, say, the past 20 years, the Indian market has become more open to international products and brands, especially in retail stores and malls. Initially, people went a bit crazy over foreign products when they were available to them. But nowadays, people have realized that they can ask for products that cater to their wants and needs and have products that suit them. And people stand a pretty good chance of getting what they want now in India, especially since the last 5 or 6 years with the boom of the e-commerce in India. Indians, even in the smaller towns and cities, have access to a greater choice and variety of products from all over the country and the world, delivering right to their doorstep. And as we said, with Amazon Prime being so cheap, currently Amazon is able to cover 90% of the country's postcodes, which is really phenomenal. Nowadays, you'll find an increasing number of made in India labels on products, which people really like. And of course, not all the products that we want to sell will have that made in India label on it, because we might be importing our products from abroad. But what we want to bring out here is the real need to understand India's wants and needs, and we want to sell products made for India. Food is perhaps the most culturally sensitive category because you have Hindus that don't eat beef, Muslims that don't eat pork, and a sizable percentage of the country that doesn't eat meat at all. Let's talk about KFC. The first foreign fast food company to come into India was KFC.
I think that this is a very, very relevant point because obviously not everybody wants to sell food. But the thing is that you can take some very important lessons, as you'll see that McDonald's did also. So, important factors when considering launching your brand and what Jasmine's talking about, made for India,
Yeah, so KFC, they did really badly in the beginning. And at the same time, Indian people were just getting started to the idea of having Western fast food. And they thought Western culture was going to harm their traditional foods. And there were big anti-KFC protests and a movement that claimed that KFC was using illegally high amounts of monosodium glutamate, which was harmful to health. And they were selling food that was cooked and fried in pork fat. So KFC ended up being banned from India temporarily.
So that was their disastrous first outing.
Yes.
But they didn't give up, thankfully.
Yes, they didn't give up, and they came back a few years later. But they only had one restaurant for many years in Bangalore, and that had to have police guarding it. So KFC has had to work very hard to understand their mistakes. But now you'll find KFC sells, besides the fried chicken, they sell vegetarian items, and they have 350 outlets all over India. So now McDonald's, as you know, McDonald's sells its signature beef burgers in other parts of the world. And McDonald's came in 1996 to India, just 1 year after KFC. But it learned from KFC's mistakes. And so it ditched the beef and the pork and introduced the chicken Maharaja Mac.
Well, that's the equivalent of the Big Mac, Yes. So they made it Maharaja Mac, Very smart, very clever.
Also, they made the vegetarian Mak Aloo Tikki, which is a burger made from potatoes and peas. And they also use
Maharaja means king, just to clarify.
Yeah, that's right.
Right.
That's right. Yes.
And they also use mint mayonnaise in their burgers. So to allay the strict dietary and religious concerns and the taboos of mixing meat and vegetarian foods, cooking is done separately by McDonald's, with different sets of workers. Those cooking the veggie meat wear green aprons, and those the veggie meals wear green aprons, and people handling the meat wear red. They also use different utensils to work with. And now McDonald's has 400 outlets in India and about 320 million customers every year. Then we have IKEA, the great furniture giant. They came to India just 1.5 years ago, and they've had to do quite a bit of product localization as well. As we know, they design and sell ready-to-assemble furniture, but unlike in the West, people in India are quite new to the concept of assembling their own furniture. So IKEA came up with little modifications and introduced new services. So they partnered with a company where people can book furniture assembly services via an app or a website. They also saw how Indian families host impromptu gatherings, which led the designers to create more folding chairs. And they also made lower cabinets and countertops, keeping in mind the average women tend to be shorter than Europeans and Americans. So they've done their bit. Also their food, they call it not just Swedish, but Swedeshi, because the word deshi means, belonging to India. So they've coined this new term, Swedeshi cuisine, and they dropped their beef and their pork, and they've made chicken meatballs.
That's right. So actually, it's really quite interesting. One thing that you might also notice, just in the language side of things, of course, India has like 22 different recognized main languages, but then you've got 7 which are very, very considered. They all sort of compete with each other. And of course India, the main in the north, they speak Hindi as a very big language, and then in the south they have South Indian languages, but English is widely spoken. And then the thing is that the e-commerce marketplaces are obviously accessed by people from all over the country. So you've got Amazon India and Flipkart, and they're in English. But the English, is also a little bit localized, just as in any other part of the world. Like you've got Americanisms in America, you've got British expressions in the UK, you've got European expressions in European English, and Australian expressions, and so you've got Indian expressions, right? So just to give you an idea, like for example, glasses, eyeglasses, you would say glasses in other parts of the world, but in India, if you say glasses, it could mean eyeglasses, but it could also mean just glasses for drinking. Mm-hmm. But the correct word in India would be a pair of spectacles, which is kind of a little bit archaic, but it is what it is, So just certain things. And the dates, the format of the dates, they're used to the UK, where the month comes in the middle. The date is a day, month, and year. So it's kind of like that, And then you've got just a mixture of English and Hindi sometimes in slogans and different catchphrases, where like Domino's uses a very popular one where it's a mixture of English and Hindi, and very catchy. And it's rhyming, and it basically says "Hungry kya? Domino's ka," and basically means, are you hungry? Eat Domino's. It doesn't sound as catchy in English, but in Hindi it sounds really like it's this Hinglish combination. So it's kind of very creative and very catchy and cool and hip. Yeah, Jonathan, I think we have some FAQ things that we
so these are some of the questions that have come up since we've been running Global Seller Solutions, from a lot of people interested in selling on the Indian market. Because very often the first thing they do is, all right, is this a marketplace for me? And they quickly go online, they go and check these various marketplaces. And often you'd find these are the common questions that we get, topics and questions that we get asked about, which is like things like, the price point is very low in India, how can we compete there? Or I've never heard of any sellers. And again, Somesh has just talked about localization, and then things like, to be aware of things like cultural sensitivity and how money is managed by people in India.
Yeah. So like, excuse me, let's hit this price point is low in India thing, because people, you can actually use tools like Jungle Scout and other tools to look for products and see. And then you might think, oh, you know what, the price point is so low in India. But that's the case in certain categories, even in the US market. If you look with the influx of Chinese sellers coming in, it's become a lot more difficult because they're launching products at very low prices. In the UK, we see that too. But let's not, just go by very little bits of information, because don't forget, India has a huge population, and there are prices which are catering to different kinds of people. What could be a good idea is to look at pricing for different levels, like have a broader, more horizontal offering in your products, rather than just targeting one segment. You could have, like some of these guys like IKEA and a lot of other brands, they have products which are cheap and their products mid-range and higher range. And people do buy, and because nowadays quality is becoming more, something that's sought after. It's not just, earlier they used to, use India as a dumping ground for like substandard products, but it's not so much anymore. And there is a certain standard expected. If you're going to get bad products or poor quality products, you're going to have a lot more returns, and you're just going to get run out of the market. So if you've got a good quality product, very well packaged, you've got a good social media presence. Don't forget, India has the highest Facebook population in the world. So if you've got a good product generally, and you're confident of your quality, it will do better. And you can charge slightly higher prices, because people are, there's a huge middle class with a lot of disposable income, especially the young people, which India basically has a huge population of people under the age of 35. It's one of the highest. So it's
yeah. I'd also like to add one more very important point in what Sumesh is mentioning here, and that is with the recent influx of internet and access to in rural areas as well as in main centered areas, quality is now becoming a very big thing, because they've got access to the internet and international markets. They're able to actually see better products. So what you'd find is the local population now want those better products, not like knockoffs or something cheaper. Sometimes they go for quality now, and it's becoming a very common trend you'd see in India.
Yeah, and the other thing that, going back to what Jonathan just said, is that you've got a lot of what is known as tier 2 and tier 3 cities. Like tier 1 cities are the big cities, like Mumbai and Delhi. Delhi has 26 million people, Mumbai has like 21, and so those are like the big cities. And then you've got slightly smaller cities, which are tier 2 cities, but they're not like small. They are very big still. They're a few million, like a tier 2 city would have 5 million to 6 million people, maybe even 8 million people. And a tier 3 might have 1 or 2 million people, which is still very big compared to other parts of the world. So what's happened is that in these smaller cities, they don't have as many big malls and huge, shopping districts and things like that as the big cities do. So people come in to the e-commerce marketplaces to look for products, because now they can just get it shipped right to their door. And excuse me, and India has something called cash on delivery even. So they can see the product. If they like it, they can pay at the delivery point. And so that is actually opening up the population at large to a lot of different choice and variety in product selection. So yeah, so if you've got good quality products, you can make sure you can be certain that you will succeed. Okay,
I would say that goes along with the talk. You're going to talk about credit cards here also.
All right. So shall we skip across down to credit cards and come back? We won't miss out anything. Don't worry. So credit cards is actually a very important thing, because the ingrained training that people have in India is avoid debt like the plague. Don't get into debt. Don't owe money. Although that's changing, and the credit card companies have been offering very high loyalty points in India to get credit card adoption become more mainstream. But still, I mean, people prefer not to, and a lot of people don't have credit cards. So if the e-commerce companies only depended on people who had credit cards, they wouldn't get much. So they've gone into debit cards. They've got prepaid wallets on mobile, like Paytm, for example, mobile payment solutions. Of course, there's cash on delivery. So there are a lot of prepaid wallet systems, like that, and of course the debit cards. And that always has been more sort of adopted over the last few years, and that's helped. So these are just some mindset things that we want to explain to you. Going back up to the second point here, I never hear of any big sellers on Amazon India or Flipkart. Okay, so again, this is a very cultural thing. You're not supposed to brag about how much money you're making. It's considered impolite, it's considered rude, and even ill-mannered, because you're trying to show off to people. And so it's not considered nice. So and although there are some people who do that, but generally you will never do that. And another reason is, if somebody is being successful at what they're doing, they would rather keep it under the radar for many reasons. One, they could get other competitors jumping onto the opportunity, so they'd just rather keep quiet about it. Number two, they don't want to be targeted by relatives who come after their money, because people do have a lot of relatives. Everybody's going to be piling on, and yeah, so many different reasons they may want to just keep it low key and things like that. And so yeah, but that doesn't mean that there aren't big sellers. There are very, very big sellers on Amazon India and Flipkart. They're doing huge amounts. It's just that they won't divulge what and how much they're making. So I think what do you think, Jonathan? We've covered most of this.
Yes, we have. I think another important thing to mention about here is around the cultural sensitivity.
Yeah.
And that is when selling your product, obviously in India. And again, just coming back to why, and again, thank you, Mekla, for inviting us to the call, is what us at Global Seller Solutions does is we help you through these entire processes in a way. And that is one, not just the setup and management of the operational element of your business when running in India, but what we also do is, being Amazon sellers, we understand the ecosystem that is needed in order to support you. And what we're doing is we're tying in with the very specialist people, very people that are trusted and have been used, and a good track record within the Indian subcontinent that can actually help you in your journey, from listings to PPC to even potential sourcing the products. And why we're doing this is we're not trying to be one of those fire and forget type businesses. What we're trying to do is we're trying to build an ecosystem where you can grow as a seller, and most importantly compete with other similar companies there, because again, being foreign, being international, working in India because of the regulatory requirements, but also the way business is done there, like Sumesh had mentioned, cultural sensitivity, localization. It's important to have a ecosystem in place that would actually help you, versus you going out there and looking for things to try and put together yourself, and obviously come across stumbling blocks which could impact your business. So what we do in Global Seller Solutions is we not just help with the operational part of things, like making sure the setup of the company takes place. Again, the setup is not as easy as a lot of other countries, where you could just literally go online, set up the company, and boom, you're done. Whereas in India, sorry.
No. Yeah, sorry, John.
So whereas in India, what you'd have is you'd actually have to set up a physical presence. So there'd be a requirement for a potential director to be present as well, and you will have active control, which is a great thing. But what we do is we basically manage those elements for you, so you can focus again on what you do best, selling on Amazon. And we've got the infrastructure in place for that, as well as an ecosystem of a variety of services that you would generally use when selling on Amazon.
Just to give you a little example of some of the regulatory compliances that are needed. This is very unique, but India is strict on this because let's say if you have an address at a company registered at that address, there will be a verification check. Somebody will come out to physically check that that place is where you say your company is. Also, when you're applying for the local entity and the directors, the local nominee director, at least one of the directors, has to sit there, take a photograph in that place with the board of the company being displayed, and you have to upload it. This is a law that just came in April this year. So that's verified. You have to have that. It's just against money laundering and tax evasion and that kind of stuff like that. So those are things, and the Indian tax system is quite complex. There are 2 GST compliances needed every month, and then there's something called TDS, which is tax deductible at source, where if anybody's providing a service, like Amazon is providing you a service in terms of marketplace access and fulfillment, so then you're supposed to deduct 10% of whatever they charge you. But then Amazon charges you first and then gives you the money. So you have to take 10% and give that to the government every month, and then claim it back as a refund, by filing the stuff, and then Amazon refunds you. So it's a bit complex, but then we take care of all of those things. Yeah. So Jonathan?
And just to add to that as well, so because of the recent changes in the rules and regulations, the Indian government are now very open for foreign investors to come in and help set up, as long as the rules and regulations are being met. And again, reiterating that is where we help is with the corporate part of it, the taxes, as well as the legal elements. And
just Jonathan, one good thing which we have forgotten to mention earlier, and that's a real good reason why you should come to India, is that the new rules say that Amazon and Flipkart or any other e-commerce marketplace facilitator cannot sell their own brands on their own marketplaces. At least not, they're not allowed to own any brands. They're not allowed to own those companies selling those brands, They can only own up to 25% of those companies. So Amazon cannot suddenly launch a competitive product to your brand and undercut you. They cannot do that. The laws prevent them.
There is something in India which they have, which is the antitrust, and also to prevent those measures, which is you can't suddenly come in and sell a product significantly cheaper. And at the same time, also there are some products which are what they call protected. So you cannot sell in some certain markets which would impact the local sellers. For example, it could be things in agriculture like rice. Not that you'd sell that on Amazon, but it's possible if it's in essentials. But it's things like that which you'll have to be very careful of. So you won't find big businesses suddenly coming in, let's say, for example, selling a TV and selling it for £25 or $25 or $50. When the actual price where everyone else is selling the price point at is 100, 150, you could actually be getting a knock on the door from the local government saying, what are you playing at? So again, that's a really good way, because what it is it's a protected market, it's regulated, but most importantly, they're very open for foreign sellers as well as local sellers to come on board onto this platform. But they want to make sure it's very fair. And again, just to reiterate what Sumesh was saying about Amazon and larger e-commerce companies trying to sell on their own platforms, there are regulations in place to prevent that, as well as them trying to go outside and set up their own companies. They can do it again, but they cannot own a major share, and it's only up to be a maximum of 25%. Again, another regulatory minefield which Amazon and others are looking into, whether it's actually worth down the line. Reiterating another thing is, again, why do people come to us to help? We help, we are reliable, we have the trust, the compliance issue, and most importantly, transparency. And what that means when we say transparency is you have sight of everything because it's your business. So you get to see all the taxes, all the documentation, everything. You have access to everything when working with us. And most importantly, you have access to a ecosystem which allows you to tap into and use to get things done for you in an easy manner. And most importantly, because we have brought them into our ecosystem, we have verified them. So you're not going to get into trouble using these services.
So Jonathan, can I just clarify? So maybe you can just explain clearly, like, what exactly are the services that you offer? So you help with the company formation, with all of the legal requirements that are need to that need to be met, and then all of the compliance, like the corporate compliance.
That is correct.
And taxation.
Yes.
Right? Okay. And then for everything else, you have an ecosystem of service providers that can help with other things related to, could be like logistics or product research or branding or whatever else is needed.
That's right, Meghla. I think that's perfectly put.
Yeah,
couldn't
we
be any
also
clearer
provide
than
the
that.
nominee director and the the address, and those are all part of the compliances. Yeah, but yes, also we give you a whole month by month compliance requirements and with dates and things like that, which we will be taking care of. So you get a whole journey ahead of yourself, ahead of time, like what to expect over the next year. There are dates and things like that. So yeah. So we give you all that. So you're not sort of hit with any surprises. Of course, I mean, there's always something that can come up, laws change, things like that. But generally, I mean, you have a good overview.
Okay. And then you, of course, help people, set up their companies there. So can you talk a little bit about what are the requirements for a foreigner to set up a company in India, and how do you help with all of that?
Yeah, so I think just to reiterate to one of the original points, when selling in India, ideally Global Seller Solutions are looking for those people that have experience selling on Amazon and understand the nuances of Amazon before approaching this market. And we've had experience where we've actually told people who are interested in starting their first business in India, we usually tell them it's best not to. It's better you try in other marketplaces. From an Indian perspective, what we do is how the process would kickstart, or in other words, the customer journey would be is if this is something that you're already a mature seller and you feel, yes, this is an amazing marketplace, which it is, and you want to get in early, just contact us. And how the process would kickstart is we'd have an initial discussion with you, make sure the formalities are done. And then what we do is we'd kickstart the process in India, which is the registration of the company. We'd also sign up all the requirements like your PAN, which is your income tax department cards, as well as allowing you to sell, and the registration of the business locally and directors. Once we've got that initial setup, and the setup usually takes between we try to make it as quick as possible, but we try and do it within 3 months. And we also help with other processes of setting up on Amazon if you have the requirements, so you can have your account set up. Once that is in place,
the company requires a local director, and
that
so
is
you
correct.
provide the local director. And how much share does this local director have of the company? And are they like an active director, or how do they participate in the company?
So yes, we do have we organize the directors locally, which is which will be your nominee director. The active part they keep in play is primarily around the compliance element and working with us to make sure that some of the regulations are being met. However, a lot also falls on you, because as the primary owner of the company, you will require to manage that right and manage those requirements from a compliance perspective. And Meghla, to add to that, which is a good point, which is how much share do they exercise? It's very, very minimal, because what will happen is they are nominee directors. They don't usually have a significant stake in the business, as in from a shares perspective. It'll always be the primary owner or the foreign seller that would dominate the main shares amount. And the ratio that, again, just coming back to it, if you're looking at it, is at 100 shares in a company. Again, the ratio is all up to you as a director, what you would like to do and what you'd like to manage. We also make sure to ensure that depending on what the legal requirements are, we recommend a kind of how much is controlled by the local director as well. And they do take an active part, again, in the compliance elements.
See, one thing that they need to do is that they need to just often sign off on tax filings and things like that, and of course everybody has digital signatures now, so that is absolutely a requirement. So they have to have digital signatures, and so all that is taken care of. And one thing also that I think is very important to consider is that this is not for someone who just wants to stick their toe in, and then if they don't like it, they're going to pull out. you can't do this, because there's a minimum commitment of at least 1 year. And winding down a company in India is a pretty laborious and lengthy process. It can take up to 2 years to wind down a company. And this is because they don't want just people getting out without, fulfilling their liabilities and clearing out any tax dues and things like that. Because if they could just take their money and leave, I mean, it would be pretty, easy to do. But then the Indian government will not allow that. So if you're serious about selling this marketplace, you've got to look at that minimum. And even for us, because we would have to continue operations continued, even if you're not doing any business, you have to continue certain operations, keep reporting, even if it's a nil return, things like that. So just keep in mind that. But yes, is it rewarding? Absolutely. Think about it like, if you were to enter Amazon.com or the US market or European market, well, you can see the whole Amazon journey internationally has been in waves. The guy started on Amazon.com, and people who got in early were like, wow. Nowadays you can still do it, but the competition is a lot more. There are 2,000 new sellers being added on every day from last year. So then the next wave came was Europe, and the UK, and that's still sort of developing, and people are expanding into Europe and everything. So people who get in early into these things always have an advantage. People who come in towards the end, it's like a wave, so you've got to come in when the wave is just rising, and India is kind of right there at the beginning. So people get in. There are a lot less sellers now, as opposed to if you were to take the population to number of sellers ratio, it's really small. What is the figure, Jonathan?
I think right now at the moment, from a interview that Megla you shared with us, I think one of the executives on Amazon had mentioned they're currently around 600,000 sellers across the whole of India.
That's 1.33 billion people, maybe with currently 500 million active buyers or something like that. Just imagine the ratio. What a huge vacuum there is. So that's a huge opportunity.
And overall, the e-commerce market in India is growing so fast. It's expected to reach $120 billion by the end of 2020, growing at 50%. So that's really huge. So you guys are right. I mean, this is the right time to really get onto the bandwagon. So apart from Amazon, there's also Flipkart. So would you guys also help sellers sell on Flipkart, or is this only for Amazon?
No, this is as well. We will be helping with Flipkart. However, what we are recommending to a lot of people, because of the Amazon world we're all part of, is it's best to start on the initial step, to get a good grip and an understanding of how it all works. But we do, within our ecosystem, have facilitators that can help get onto the Flipkart journey as well.
Okay. So are you guys done with your slides? Should we take questions now, or do you have more slides to go? Oh, great. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so let's take questions. So here we have one question from Raj. He's asking, is there any option to open an account for Amazon India for foreigners?
The answer to that is yes. Again, it's because of the regulations in place, you can, as a foreigner, easily set up in India through our process.
But there will be a requirement. You can set up an account, but you cannot run a business on Amazon without having a GST registration. So that's the goods and services tax. You have to have that. So without that, you can't sell. So in order to have that, you have to have the whole thing: the local entity, the nominee director, the tax registration, bank accounts, that whole process. There is no other way.
Yes. So, for example, to sell on the Indian platform, I think for the first three things they would require is the GST number, the PAN, as well as a local bank entity's details. Otherwise, Amazon India doesn't allow you to set up the account.
So this is true for locals as well. Is that correct?
That is correct.
That's
okay.
right.
So as an individual, you can't really sell on Amazon.
For sure.
You have to have all those things.
Okay. Okay. Okay, let's see. We have more questions here. So I'm putting up the questions on the screen for everyone to see. So what are the challenges other than price sensitive and high return rate in Amazon India? Yeah, let's address this high return rate. We've heard about this from a couple of different people. Do you guys want to talk about this a little?
Yeah, again, the return rate. I mean, think about it. Why would somebody return your product? it's either that the product, it wasn't easy to use, your instructions weren't clear, or it was not a good quality product, or they change their mind. I mean, which can happen anywhere else. It could be any of those reasons. It could be somebody who's found a better product than yours. So those are so we have to come back to the basics of why people would return those products. So
We'll have somebody in our ecosystem dealing with returns in India also.
Yeah, so that's the returns processing, like we all know that. We've had that same, because we're based in the UK, we sell in the US, in Canada, in Europe, and so we have had to figure out that whole system of having somebody who processes returns for us in each of those countries, looks at it, checks, because a lot of those returns are actually perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with them,
Yeah.
and they're recycled back in if necessary. Yeah.
Just to also add to that, because the question saying is, what are all the other challenges? There are many other challenges as well.
Yes.
Again,
Good.
one of the big things which get hit by a lot of people is the compliance element.
Yes.
And what that means is very often when people set up as foreign sellers as well, we tend to suddenly look for the cheapest option available in India for how can I quickly go and set up. Not realizing that there is this huge, long train of compliances, regulations which are going to be following you. So it's very, very important to keep in mind, if you're looking to set up, make sure that the organization, like in our case, us, is taking care of all those things, because you could get really inundated really fast and in trouble if you don't meet them. And an Indian government, again, they are a protective market, you have to understand, and they're open. So, but you have to be careful, because what you could do is you could suddenly start piling up fine after fine, and they have their fines based on a percentage based on a daily basis. So you could be fined like 10% a day or 5% a day or something if you're not paying
just to
them.
give you an idea, like your tax deductible at source, the deadline for every month is on the 5th of each month, and then there's an 18% interest for delay. So you can pile up pretty fast, because people, see, the government is very smart. They say that, okay, you know what, you could be withholding that money, and earlier they didn't have this monthly compliance in place. So what people would do is they would deduct the 10%, and you're supposed to give it to the government against, let's say I take Megla provides a service for me, and if I owe her $1,000, I have to deduct 10% and give it to the government, and then she can show it against her tax return at the end of the year. But what people were doing was they were deducting the 10% and holding it back, and then they wouldn't give it to the government till the end of the year. So they were making money on that $100. They would invest it back into business and stuff. So the government got wise to that, and they said, no, you have to submit it every month, and if you do not, you're going to face a penalty of 18% interest on it. So
and
these are all things like that.
And the other key thing too is again, we mentioned this, and that is called localization. So there is a lot of openness to foreign goods and quality goods that you can buy, and people want in India. However, you have to make sure that you've localized it as well. I mean, one example is French Connection in the UK. Europe. They started trying to sell in India. And they got banned because suddenly FC UK was not a very appropriate brand, and people felt it was rude, and they basically got banned from selling that specific slogan in India because they felt it's not. So again, it's sensitivity to your product and making sure that the product you're selling is customized to a certain degree to the Indian market, so that you do not step on anyone's toes. There's a very old saying which used to go saying that, your freedom ends where your nose begins. And they take that very seriously in India. So do what you want, enjoy it, but just make sure you don't infringe on things like, religion, and most importantly, stay away from the political angle, because it gets really touchy sometimes, we've noticed.
Right. Okay, so we have another question. How is the demand between made in India versus international brands?
I think people are very open, and they do look for international brands, and they go very well. And you can see, even if you go into the malls, you'll see the big malls have all the brands, everything, the very expensive luxury brands, which are considered very premium. And they have, the mid-range brands. They're all there. And again, but they've all sort of adapted their approach to the Indian market to some extent. Obviously, what works and resonates with audiences in the US will not necessarily capture people in India the same way. So you've got to sort of adapt somewhat.
You've got to remember the made for India.
Yeah, that's the idea.
That could be your label.
And one thing that, I mean, I was just using this example with somebody the other day. So it's like if you sell, for example, ski products, which are winter sports, and you're suddenly faced with 500 million people in a place which is like beach and hot summer weather kind of most of the year. And then you say, hey, but you know what? Nobody's buying my ski products there. Yeah, fine. But what about tailor making a whole brand or adapting a whole sub brand to your new market? I mean, the idea here is not the question to be, if you're asking the question that, hey, how will my brand do in India? That's the wrong question to ask.
Just to add to that.
Yeah. You should be asking, what you need to be asking is, here's this huge market. What am I going to do as an entrepreneur? Like adapt and, what is it that people are looking for?
And that's something you do in every market. Now, just to add to that as well, Meghla, which it's a good question, which you're saying is the international brands. A lot of large organizations, just like we mentioned, Amazon, Sony, Panasonic, a lot of these organizations, because of the change in regulations, they are investing significantly in India. You find Bose, I mean, over the last few years, you suddenly see all these little test centers which are opening up in India for Bose. You can come and sit down and listen to the sounds and listen to everything. This expanse has suddenly opened a doorway for a lot of organizations. So demand is high. Yeah.
Yeah. I just to give you a little anecdote that I really like. Many years ago, there was a shoe company trying to sell shoes into Africa, and they sent a salesman. And this guy wrote back and said, you know what, nobody here in Africa wears shoes. I'm coming home, And so they sent back another salesman, and he kept sending back order after order with a message saying, you know what, everybody here needs shoes because nobody wears them yet. Everybody needs shoes. So it's just that, looking for the opportunity, what is it that, you're going to be like the first salesman or the second one.
Right. Are there any product categories in terms of, foreign-made products or international products that are more popular?
I would say electronics is very popular.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What about cosmetics and beauty or skincare products?
Absolutely.
And just to add to that, in our ecosystem, we do have specialist companies that could actually help you on this journey of selecting the products and also researching products within the Indian India, which could potentially be helpful. Please, again, keep in mind that depending on the product you are selling in India, there are certain regulations that need to be met. Again, something that within our ecosystem we have when selling.
Yeah, for sourcing products within India, you've got Meghla, so she can help you with that already. And obviously, if you're sourcing within India, then you have a shorter journey in a way, even in shipping terms and import duties and taxes and, that whole customs clearance and stuff like that. So that's definitely not a bad idea to look at alternatives because, you can get products overall cheaper. So it's worth considering, yeah.
Okay.
But a lot of the international brands, sorry, Meghla, just to keep you, reiterate here, a lot of international brands are making their products in India, actually.
Right. Yes.
Many of the big manufacturers, clothing manufacturers, leather, all of that, all made in India. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay. So what are the taxes that overseas sellers need to pay when transferring the money from India to their home country? Yeah. So remitting money outside of India, that's a bit tricky, right?
Yes, there are certain. So before you do any kind of remittances, there are forms that need to be filled in, as well as there needs to be a certain ratio that needs to be maintained within the country. Now, this is on a case-by-case basis, so there's no generic formula that can be handed out. It depends on the size of the business, the scale, and the cash within the business. And what we have within our ecosystem, again, which you do get access to immediately, is an accountant that actually advises you on what you could be potentially remitting as what you should not be doing in order to, stay within the regulations.
One thing that obviously can do is pay for your goods from India once your business is up and running. So then you can write off expenses, you can do a lot of different things like that. And of course, you're concerned about transferring the money. So as long as taxes are paid, there is no problem. There is a compliance required. There's such a thing called the forms 15CA and 15CB, which has to be filled out for every remittance going out of the country, because you have to justify what is the purpose. But generally, if you're compliant, you shouldn't really have a problem. Again, like Jonathan said, our accountants will advise you on that, how to and how often. And the best thing about it is one of our people, the head of operations, actually, is a banker, an international banker with 30 years of experience. So dealing with, clients, international, all kinds of stuff. So we've got all of that.
Okay. So here we have another question. Does one need to be an Indian citizen to sell in India? I think we've addressed this. You don't necessarily have to be an Indian citizen as long as you can set up a company and meet all of the regulations and guidelines. Okay, so here is a good question for you. Since you guys are also selling on Amazon, what are the risks for new sellers to disclose their products to you?
Good. That's a really very good point, and I'm so glad you brought that up, because we were going to talk about that, but we've forgotten. To be honest, it's good you prodded us about that. Okay, so we signed an NDA with you, and we are not going to be selling any products other than our own products, which we already sell in other parts of the world. We're not launching any other products in India. In fact, we will completely focus our dedication and time to helping you guys succeed. So we will not be selling.
It's our promise.
And we will not exactly, and we will not be disclosing your information to any other seller. Obviously, even if they're competing brands, it's completely confidential. We're signing NDAs. We honor those. So no risk at all.
And again, that's a reason we do have a lot of people that come to us. Just to add to that, is because when people are looking to potentially see if would their product potentially sell, or they talk about their products, we make it very clear upfront. We are not going to be competing with them, and most importantly, using our services, we don't let on to other people what you are selling as well. I mean, there's a very strict Chinese wall which is mounted that prevents anyone from knowing what the other person is selling as well.
Right, absolutely. That's super important. Okay, let's see what other questions we have. So what is the average cost of setting up a company and compliance charges per year in your fees? So I think let's address the cost question now. So why don't you talk a little bit about what your fees are for the setup and everything, and what's included in the fees that people pay?
Okay, so Jonathan, do you want to talk?
Yeah. Sorry, I was going to get into that. So currently, we've got an introductory offer for people because of starting off, and what we've got is right now we're charging around $12,000 for the year, and we're also, this is again a very introductory offer. It's going to be going up over time, and I think over and above that, we've got an additional special offer for Meghla and her.
Yeah.
Well, we'll talk about that later. So what we're offering is currently it's $12,000 for the year, and this takes care of all the regulatory compliances and the management piece. Also, this is there is a fair use policy, like you'd call it. If you're doing close to a few thousand transactions a month, there would be a small increment. But again, we see that as very nominal, and we'll always be very upfront for that. This price point is only set for a limited time because of the initial setups, but down the line that would go up. There's also an additional charge of 1%, which would be levied, but that's only after the first year. And the reason we're doing that as a special offer is because we want to make sure that you're growing, you're up and running, and you're actually reaping the rewards of starting off in India.
Yeah, so actually, just to go into the nitty-gritty a bit more, is that the fees would cover the setting up of the company, the registration of the GST, the PAN, the bank account, all the the address. There is an address, physical address, to be maintained in India for your company. The nominee director, the accountants,
Bookkeeping,
would
yeah.
be, this is important because, again, what Jonathan said, like if you have an increase in the number of transactions, so that might go up slightly. If it depends, but mostly it should be covered. And there may be some smaller fees here and there, but not really. Generally, everything is done. All your monthly compliances, your annual, quarterly, all those will be covered in this. And that's, with, there are other companies who might say, oh, we'll do it for so much so, but then they have upsells on it. So we're not trying to give you any upsells on this. This is it. This is including your tax filings, your bookkeeping, everything is compliant.
It's not including the tax.
No, it doesn't include the tax itself, obviously, because that's payable on goods that you sell. We don't
Yeah.
know what you're going to be selling and how much you're going to be selling. So, and that's just it. And the 1% fee, that's on turnover, but right now we're sort of only going to be doing that from the second year onwards. Later on, it will come down to the first 6 months being waived off, and then after the 6th month. But for now, it's just for the 1% in the second year onwards.
So just to clarify, this $12,000 is per year.
That's
And
correct.
the first year is $12,000. And then starting from the second year, it will be increased a little bit, as you said, right?
No,
And then,
so just that's the special offer and that is
Okay.
those that get on now, they will be paying 12 forever.
okay,
Yeah.
so it's 12,000 every year. And from the second year, it's 12,000 plus 1% of your turnover.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah, so if
sales.
you think like
And the reason for that 1% is because of the increase in liability and management as well. That will happen with the growth of company as well as growth of Global Seller Solutions as well. It's to help mitigate risks as well as increase our ecosystem.
Yeah.
To also add to that is you have access to an ecosystem of a lot of qualified people that can help you on your journey. But most importantly, it is not you have to use them. It's an option to use them.
Yeah, don't forget that
can
our
you-
company directors or anybody will not be selling on Amazon, so they're kind of giving up that right.
Mm-hmm. So then apart from this $12,000 investment, what approximately or how much additional investment do you think someone might need for doing, product research and all of those kinds of things?
That's just, I mean, it all depends. Like we said earlier, that if you're a mature seller, then this is for you. If you're not, and if you're just trying to get started, I mean, you should have those basics done pretty much. If you need advice and, checking things out, or, do I need certification, or, we can try to guide you with that. But a lot of those things will come about when you are already, you can communicate with Amazon themselves as well, and a lot of times they can tell you, or you can look, online, you can search for, information. If you need help from us, we can also direct you. Obviously, professionals, if you need their services, they will charge some fees. But again, part of our ecosystem, we will, if we can get a better price for you, we will definitely do that.
Okay. And then, so let's just talk about the special offer that we have for India Sourcing Trip attendees. So if you are joining us in India this April for India Sourcing Trip, then you get an additional $1,000 off on this service. So I think it goes really well with India Sourcing Trip, because if you're coming to India, then it's also an opportunity for you to meet with some of the service providers and get a better understanding of the Indian market and how things work over there. And if you can, maybe source products from India to sell on Amazon India as well, So I think it's a good opportunity to do both. So there's an additional $1,000 off for people who are joining India Sourcing Trip in April. So that means you'll be paying $11,000 for the first year. So
That's right.
how cool is that?
Pretty cool, I think.
Okay, let's just see. We have one more question here. Do we need any insurance for the products?
Yes, you will need insurance, and that's like you would in any marketplace when selling your products there, and it's like an indemnification, and Amazon will require you to have that.
So it's like liability insurance.
That is correct. Yes, liability insurance to protect the products. So yes, you will need that. Again, How much it's going to cost, that depends on the product and what the insurance provider you decide to get. Again, we can offer you suggestions of various insurance providers we have in the ecosystem, but again, it's really down to your choice. We don't like to pigeonhole you to a specific provider.
Okay, cool. All right, so guys, if you have any more questions, we have a couple more minutes here. So let us know if you have any more questions. And while they're doing that, let me just put up the website of Global Seller Solutions. So this is where you can go to get more information. So can you tell us how can people reach you? Is there an email address or form on your website?
The easiest way to do it at this point is we've got an email address, which is hello@globalsellersolutions.com.
Okay.
Or you could reach us on our Facebook page or through Megla, and we'd be more than happy to answer your questions. What we like to do is we're not trying to go with a quantity. We prefer to go with a qualitative approach. So if you do reach out to us and you want further information, we would set up a personal one-to-one Zoom call with you and discuss about, what are your aspirations, how do you want to do this, and when would you like to get started?
Okay, so the email address is hello@globalsellersolutions.com in case anyone's interested. Let's just see if we have any more questions before we sign off. No, looks like no more questions. Okay, and so if anyone's interested in getting more information about the next India sourcing trip, head over to indiasourcingtrip.com. We have an early bird offer that will end January 31st. So I would encourage you, if you're really interested in this huge opportunity selling on Amazon India and also sourcing products from India, I think this is a great time to do that. So get more information about the trip and sign up before January 31st. All right, so Mahesh, Jasmine, Jonathan, thank you so much for your time. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you also.
Thanks so much.
All right. Thank you everyone for watching, and I will see you next week.
See you. Take
Bye.
care.
Thank you.
And wishing everyone a happy new year.
Yes. Happy New Year.